Just one careless word while drunk, and I lost the woman who loved me more than herself. From warm glances, she now only looks at me with silence. I didn't cheat. I wasn't unfaithful, but I did something even worse. This is a story I'll never forget. That evening, we were invited to a small party at a close friend's house. Everything started normally: soft music, wine, lively chatter among old friends. I remember having a few drinks, my head a little light, but still sober enough to chat. A single friend and I started talking about love and relationships. He recounted his fleeting affairs, beautiful girls who weren't compatible. I'm not sure if it was the alcohol, or if I just wanted to share something truly honest, but I blurted out, "Love doesn't come from looks. Look at my wife and me. I love her more than my ex-girlfriend, who only had beauty." I didn't think that sentence would silence the entire room, but it did. The first eyes I met after speaking were my wife's. Melissa. She looked at me as if someone had just slapped her dignity. I stammered, trying to correct myself. "I mean, you have everything. Not just beauty, but depth, you know." But the more I spoke, the more lost I became in my own confusion. When we got home, no one said a word. The silence was as heavy as a shadow pressing down on the entire room. The next morning, Melissa still made breakfast for the kids, still cleaned the house, still smiled at our children. It's just that the smile wasn't for me anymore. I tried to explain that I was drunk, that I loved her more than anyone, that I was just trying to convey the truth, that I was grateful for her for things beyond her appearance. But all those words, to Melissa, were just vague echoes after the first sentence, one she understood as, "I never thought she was beautiful." A few days later, just when I thought everything would pass, she looked at me for the last time and quietly said, "I've never felt as ugly as I have this past week. I used to believe I was a beautiful woman in your eyes." I started to cry. I apologized. I swore that to me, she was the most beautiful, strongest, and most cherished woman. But she didn't shed a single tear. Her expression was so calm it terrified me. I said something I shouldn't have, but I never expected that it would be the beginning of the end of something I thought would last forever. After that morning, Melissa seemed to transform into a different person, not in a temporary fit of anger, but a quiet and profoundly unsettling change. She didn't scold me, didn't reproach me again, but every action of hers showed me that a door in her heart had closed and I no longer had the key to enter. She no longer let me hug her every night as before. We still slept in the same bed, but she always turned her back and kept an invisible distance that I couldn't reach. Though we were husband and wife, I began to feel like a stranger in my own home. Melissa started locking the bathroom door, something she had never done in all our years of marriage. She no longer changed in front of me. The delicate silk nightgowns of old were replaced by long-sleeved t-shirts and full-length pants. She dressed as if she was defending herself from the husband who was once her closest friend. I tried to bring back the old warmth. I invited her for walks, booked reservations at her favorite restaurant, but she always claimed to be busy or simply gently declined. There was no anger or bitterness, just a heartbreaking indifference. But what hurt me the most wasn't the silence, but the changes from within her. She started going to the gym every day, sometimes 67 sessions a week. Before, she loved working out but had a balance. Now, it seemed she immersed herself in it as a way to withdraw from the world around her. She lost weight rapidly, almost 20 pounds in just 2 months. Her body became more toned, her figure more prominent, but her eyes no longer sparkled with joy as before. She also spent more time with friends and family, not because she hated me, but because it seemed she only felt comfortable where I wasn't present. She was always busy, either taking the kids out, or having dinner with her sister, or reading in the living room with headphones on, keeping me at a distance. I began to live with the feeling of paying the price, not for cheating, not for betrayal, but just for a thoughtless remark. But it turns out, some words are as sharp as knife sand. When they cut into a woman's pride and trust, they can leave scars that never heal. One night, as I stood outside the bathroom door, listening to the water running inside and seeing my wife's blurred silhouette through the frosted glass, I suddenly felt like a thief. Not because I had done anything wrong, but because I was no longer invited into her inner world. I don't know what Melissa was thinking, nor if she still loved me, but I knew one thing for sure: I had hurt her, and what choked me up the most was no matter how much I loved her, I couldn't erase the feeling she carried in her heart, the feeling of no longer being cherished, no longer being seen as the most beautiful woman in the eyes of the man she loved. I used to think the greatest pain in marriage was betrayal, but now I realize there's something even more painful: living beside the person you love, but no longer being able to touch their heart. By the third month after that party, Melissa was almost no longer the wife I once knew. It wasn't that she changed into a bad person, but that she was trying to become a new version. Without me by her side, I saw it most clearly through her social media use. Before, her account was full of family photos, sweet moments with our 3 children, or funny pictures of our pet dog. But now, family photos became sparse, replaced by images of Melissa in the gym, wearing tight sportswear, posing in front of the mirror, and especially strange captions: "Love yourself before waiting for someone else to love you. Learn to be strong from the cracks," or "Sometimes you have to remind yourself that you deserve it." I saw her getting a lot of compliments from strangers and acquaintances, mostly compliments about her appearance: "Great body. Looks like you're in your 20s. You're amazing, sis." And what stung me the most was that she replied to almost all the comments. Before, Melissa was very private, almost never responding to compliments about her looks. Now, she would heart them, thank them, and even laugh happily at each message. More than once, I wanted to ask directly, "Who are you doing this for? Is it so you can feel desired again?" But I didn't have the courage, because I knew the person who made her feel no longer beautiful was me. Day by day, the distance between us grew. She no longer wanted me to touch her, not even small gestures like holding hands, a gentle hug from behind, or a touch on the shoulder. She recoiled unconsciously. Her body seemed to erect a barrier that I couldn't cross. I started to become insecure. My mind was filled with negative thoughts. Is she trying to attract someone else? Has she started paying attention to the compliments out there? Am I slowly becoming a stranger? I knew those thoughts were selfish. I knew Melissa wasn't the type of person to easily abandon a marriage just because of hurt. But that's why I was even more afraid that she was quietly preparing for a life without me. One evening, after the children were asleep, I decided to knock on her door. I said, my voice almost pleading, "Melissa, do you still love me?" She didn't answer immediately. She just looked at me, her eyes without anger or blame, but with an emptiness that sent chills down my spine. And then she said, very softly, "I don't know anymore. I just know I'm not the same person, and I don't know if I can still be your wife as before." I stood there, frozen. That sentence wasn't necessarily a farewell, but it was the first sign that she had one foot out of this marriage, not because of anyone else, but because of meth person who once held her hand, now slowly losing the right to do so. After the night Melissa said she wasn't sure if she could be my wife as before, I felt like I was living in a limbo between hope and despair. Every morning I woke up beside her. I wondered, will she soften today? Is there still some affection left for me? But day after day, all I received was distant, no more tender glances, no more small questions about work, not even reminders to wear a jacket if it got cold. She perfectly played the role of a wonderful mother, a good friend to those around her. Only with me, she gradually became a stranger. I started trying everything to save this margin out of obligation, but because I truly loved her. I canceled some major projects at work to spend more time at home. I picked up the kids from school, cooked dinner, did laundry, did all the smallest things to show her my effort. I even wrote her a letter by hand, something I hadn't done in years. In the letter, I didn't justify myself, didn't blame the alcohol, but just recounted why I loved her, from the way she smiled at our children every morning, to how she always knew exactly what I needed when I couldn't put it into words. I wrote that I was wrong, and I was willing to lose my pride if it made her feel worthy of being loved and admired. She received the letter, read it, folded it carefully, but no response. I invited her on a short trip. Just the two of you to a place where we used to date when we were young. She said, I can't leave the kids. I said we'd take the whole family. She said, maybe another time. And so all plans were buried in that later a safe, polite, and cruelly cold phrase. Once, I confided that I felt she had changed too much, that I missed the girl she used to be, who would hug me from behind when I was tired, who would laugh out loud when I made a silly joke, who used to look at me with eyes full of admiration. She just looked at me for a long time, then said something that made me unable to breathe. I miss myself too. When I still believed you were the safest place, I was speechless, because she said nothing wrong. I, with one thoughtless word, made her feel like she wasn't the chosen woman. I didn't cheat. I didn't betray with actions, but I betrayed with emotions. I put her on a scale with an even if unintentionally, even if to prove my current love ain, that moment, I pulled her down from the most special place in my heart. From then on, I no longer tried to pull her back as before, not because I gave up it, because I realized love cannot be saved by begging. It needs healing, and the person who was hurt must be the one who chooses to be healed. I'm still here, waiting, hoping, but I know time isn't always a cure. Some wounds, the longer they fester, the deeper they embed in the heart. I used to believe that if I was patient enough, if I just stayed, continued to love and quietly compensate, then one day Melissa would come back, or at least give me a chance to start over. But that belief began to crack as the signals she sent became clearer. She no longer wanted to hold onto this marriage. She was still in the house, still fulfilling her role as a mother, but no longer my life partner. Everything between us was gradually replaced by schedules, responsibilities, and distance. Melissa started going out more. She took extra yoga classes, joined group runs, went on short trips with friends without giving clear details. Before, she used to text me about everything, no matter how small. Now, everything about her was like her social media posts, beautiful, organized, and completely unrelated to me. I wasn't jealous. I didn't suspect her of having someone else. Melissa wasn't the type to betray, but there was something even more painful than betrayal, the feeling of being excluded from the inner world of the person you love. I no longer knew what she was thinking, what she was feeling, what she was afraid of, what she hoped for. She lived right next to me, but her soul was somewhere else, a place where I was no longer allowed to enter. Once, I saw her writing something on her laptop. When I walked into the room, she immediately closed it. She had never done that before. I asked, gently, "What are you writing?" She just smiled faintly and replied, "Just some random thoughts." That answer, light as a breeze, extinguished all the sparks of hope I was trying to keep alive. I began to think the worst, that she was preparing to leave, not with an explosion, an argument, or divorce papers slammed on the table, but by slowly withdrawing, slowly tidying up her emotions, consolidating her memories, and quietly exiting my life. I found out she had opened a separate bank account. Nothing wrong with that, many couples do it. But given our circumstances, it felt like a sign. She also started looking into short courses, freelance jobs, though she didn't say a word to me. I only knew when I accidentally saw an email she had left open. I didn't confront her. I didn't interrogate her. I just sat there, every night, with a growing fear that I was counting down the last days I could call her my wife. I had shattered my own image in the eyes of the woman I loved most. And when a woman no longer feels safe, no longer feels admired in her own marriage, she will begin to rebuild her own world. Not because she's selfish, but because it's the only way to survive after being hurt. And I was once her entire world, am now just a memory she's trying to learn to let go of. I used to think losing the person you love happens in an instant, a divorce paper, an argument, a slammed door. But now I understand Zemites. Loss comes silently, without a sound, like light draining from a room. and you don't realize when it started to fade. Melissa hasn't said goodbye yet, but everything in the way she lives, the way she communicates, the way she avoids my gaze, the way she builds her own life has said it all. We're like two roommates now, raising 3 children together, sharing responsibilities, but no longer sharing hearts. I've asked myself 1,000 times, if I could go back to that moment, that fateful party, would I have kept silent? The answer is always yes, but time, so cruel, only grants us clarity when it's too late. There are evenings, when the whole house is asleep, I sit alone in the living room, looking at the empty space where Melissa used to sit, where she used to lean her head on my shoulder, giggle at a bad movie, or simply be silent, but still feel close. Now, the chair is empty, the lights are quiet, and I sit there, with the coldness of my own mistake. I don't blame Melissa. I understand her. I understand the feeling of being knocked down by just one sentence, by the feeling that the man you trusted most carelessly compared you to the past and you lost. It's not just a wound to her appearance, but the collapse of her self-image in the eyes of the only person she wanted to be admired by. And when a woman no longer feels loved, truly loved, even a hug can become cold. Even silence can become clear evidence of distance. One weekend morning, I saw Melissa wake up earlier than usual. She wore a simple white dress, her hair neatly tied back, light makeup. She looked radiant and distant. She said she was taking the kids to her parents' house for a few days. She didn't look at me when she spoke. I didn't ask, "When are you coming back?" I just nodded, because in that moment, I understood this might be the last time my family was whole under one roof. Melissa hasn't left me legally, but emotionally, she's been gone for a long time. And the bitterest part is, I can't bring her back, not because I don't love her enough, but because I made her not want to be loved by me anymore. Now, I'm learning to live with the silence, learning to set the table for 4 instead of 5, learning to hug my children more, to fill the void their mother leaves whenever she's away, and learning to forgive myself, not to forget my mistake, but to keep living, in sobriety, in longing, and in the extremely costly lesson of thoughtlessness. I lost the woman who loved me most, all because of one careless word. And sometimes, just one sentence is enough to kill a love.